In downtown Los Angeles, the Cecil Hotel stands as a monument to darkness. Its faded grandeur masks a legacy of violence, tragedy, and infamy. Once a beacon of luxury in the 1920s, it quickly became a haven for the desperate and the damned. The hotel's history is littered with suicides, murders, and notorious residents like serial killers Richard Ramirez and Jack Unterweger. Locals call it the Suicide, a place where people check in, but don't always check out. In 2013, the Cecil's reputation would reach new heights of horror with the mysterious disappearance of Elisa Lam. The stage was set for the hotel's most chilling story yet. In January 2013, Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old student from Vancouver, checked into the Cecil Hotel. She was on a solo journey of self-discovery, documenting her travels online and staying in close contact with her family. Elisa was open about her struggles with bipolar disorder, sharing her experiences on her popular Tumblr blog. She started in a shared room, but was quickly moved to a private one after her roommates reported odd behavior. Alone in her new room, Elisa became another anonymous guest in the hotel's shadowy halls. Was her isolation a symptom of her illness, a misunderstanding, or the first sign of something more sinister? The answers would soon become a global obsession. Elisa's daily calls to her parents abruptly stopped on January 31st, the day she was supposed to check out. Her belongings were left untouched in her room, but Elisa had vanished. Police searched the hotel, finding no trace of her. Flyers went up, and the media latched onto the story. Meanwhile, guests complained of foul-smelling, discolored water from the taps. No one suspected the horrifying connection between the plumbing issues and Elisa's disappearance. The Cecil Hotel was hiding a gruesome secret in plain sight. The world was about to learn just how dark its history could get. Elisa Lam was more than a missing person. She was a vibrant, thoughtful young woman from Vancouver. She balanced extroversion and introspection, courageously traveling alone while managing bipolar disorder. Her family was her anchor, and her daily calls home were a lifeline. Elisa's openness about her mental health made her a quiet advocate for others. Her sudden silence was a chilling break from her character. The mystery of her disappearance was as complex as the life she led. Elisa's Tumblr blog, Nouvelle Nouveau, was a window into her mind. Raw, honest, and creative. She wrote candidly about her struggles and hopes, connecting with thousands who found comfort in her words. Her posts revealed both darkness and resilience, a search for meaning amid turmoil. In the weeks before her trip, her blog chronicled her anxieties and excitement. After her disappearance, scheduled posts continued, haunting readers with a voice that lingered after she was gone. Elisa's digital legacy became a crucial piece of the puzzle, fueling worldwide fascination with her story. Elisa Lam's West Coast tour was more than just a simple vacation, it was a pilgrimage. For a young woman grappling with the constraints of her mental illness and the pressures of university life, this solo trip represented a profound act of liberation. It was a chance to break free from routine, to cast off the familiar and immerse herself in the unknown. The journey was designed to be a source of inspiration and rejuvenation, a way to gather new experiences that would feed her creative and intellectual spirit. She planned her itinerary with care, mapping out a path through some of America's most iconic cities: San Diego, Los Angeles, Santa Cruz, and San Francisco. Each stop was an opportunity for a new adventure. She documented the early stages of her trip with the same enthusiasm she brought to her blog. In San Diego, she visited the famous zoo and posted photos, sharing her delight with her online followers. She was an independent traveler, navigating public transit and exploring neighborhoods on her own. This journey was a testament to her courage and her desire to prove to herself that she could manage her life and her condition on her own terms. It was an assertion of her identity outside of being a student or a daughter. She was an explorer, the protagonist of her own story, charting her own course through the world. The trip was a bold declaration of her capabilities and her yearning for freedom. Her arrival in Los Angeles on January 26, 2013, marked the next chapter of this adventure. The City of Angels, with its sprawling landscape and complex history of glamour and grit, was a fitting destination for someone so interested in the dualities of life. She checked into the Cecil Hotel, likely chosen for its low price and central location, completely unaware that this decision would be the one that sealed her fate. She was there to see the sights, to visit bookstores, and to soak in the atmosphere of a city that has inspired countless writers and artists. For Elisa, Los Angeles was not just a place on a map, it was a wellspring of new stories and new possibilities. The motivation behind such a journey is deeply personal for any traveler. But for Elisa, it seems to have been intrinsically linked to her personal growth. It was a quest to find herself, to test her limits, and to collect memories that would last a lifetime. In a poignant blog post, she quoted the author Chuck Palahniuk, "The only way to find true happiness is to risk being completely cut open." This sentiment seems to encapsulate the spirit of her travels. She was willingly making herself vulnerable, opening herself up to the world in the hopes of finding something true and meaningful. Tragically, in the heart of Los Angeles, this quest for openness would lead her not to enlightenment but to an impenetrable mystery. Elisa Lam's stay at the Cecil Hotel began uneventfully enough, but it quickly took a strange turn. Initially, she was placed in a shared, hostel-style dormitory room on the hotel's 5th floor, a common choice for budget-conscious solo travelers. Here, she was meant to share a space with several other women. However, this arrangement lasted only 2 days. Her roommates approached the hotel management with complaints about her conduct, which they described as odd behavior. As a result, the hotel staff made the decision to move Elisa to a private room of her own on the 4th floor. This relocation was a pivotal moment, isolating her from potential witnesses and placing her in a solitary environment within the sprawling, disorienting hotel. The specifics of this odd behavior have never been fully clarified, remaining one of the many frustratingly vague details of the case. Reports suggest that she was leaving strange, cryptic notes on her roommates' beds, sometimes with messages like, "Go away" or "Go home." She would also reportedly lock the door and require a password for her roommates to enter. Whether this was a manifestation of a manic episode connected to her bipolar disorder, a sign of increasing paranoia, or simply social miscalculations, is impossible to know for certain. What is clear is that her actions were disconcerting enough to prompt a formal complaint, setting in motion the events that would deepen her isolation. Once moved into her private room, Elisa's connection to the outside world seemed to become more tenuous. While she was seen in the lobby, and was known to have visited a nearby bookstore, the last bookstore, her interactions became increasingly sparse. The bookstore staff later recalled her visit, noting that she was energetic and friendly, buying books and music to send home to her family. This suggests that even in these final days, she was experiencing fluctuating moods, capable of moments of cheerful normalcy. However, inside the walls of the Cecil, something was shifting. The solitude of her private room may have amplified her internal struggles, leaving her alone to confront whatever anxieties were beginning to surface. This move to a private room intended to resolve a minor conflict inadvertently removed a crucial layer of observation. In the shared dormitory, her actions, however strange, were at least witnessed by others. In her own room, she was completely alone, her behavior unobserved and her mental state unmonitored. It was from this private space that she would embark on her final, bewildering journey to the hotel's elevator and ultimately to its roof. The complaints from her roommates and the subsequent relocation were the last clear social interactions she had. After that, she began to fade, becoming a solitary figure drifting through the hotel, her growing internal crisis hidden from view until it was far too late. The final days of January 2013 were the last moments anyone would knowingly see Elisa Lam alive. After being moved to her private room, her movements became harder to trace, but she was not yet a complete ghost. She was spotted by hotel staff in the lobby and was seen venturing out into the city. One of her last stops was a place that felt perfectly in character for her, a downtown bookstore called The Last Bookstore. The staff there would later recall her visit. They described her as cheerful and outgoing, browsing the shelves with an infectious energy. She bought several books and some music, thoughtfully selecting them as gifts to send back home to her family in Vancouver. This interaction paints a picture of someone still very much connected to the world and to her loved ones. This cheerful demeanor, however, stands in stark contrast to the vague reports of odd behavior from her former roommates just days earlier. This apparent fluctuation between high-spirited engagement and strange, reclusive actions is a hallmark of the manic and depressive episodes associated with bipolar disorder. It's possible that in the stimulating environment of a bookstore, surrounded by things she loved, she experienced a temporary lift in her mood. But what happened when she returned to the solitude of her room at the Cecil Hotel is a question that remains unanswered. These last sightings are like fragmented snapshots, offering conflicting clues about her true state of mind during those final crucial hours. Back at the hotel, her presence was noted, but in a less distinct way. She was just one of hundreds of guests passing through the bustling, transient space. No one was paying particularly close attention. She wasn't causing any disturbances that required management intervention after being moved to her private room. She was simply there, a solitary figure navigating the hotel's long, dimly lit corridors. The last time any hotel employee could definitively remember seeing her was on January 31st, the day she was scheduled to check out. She was seen in the hotel lobby that morning, but it's unclear what her plans were or where she went next. This last sighting in the lobby is the final confirmed data point before Elisa Lam effectively vanished from the face of the earth. Everything that happened after this moment is a matter of speculation, pieced together from grainy security footage and chilling conjecture. Did she return to her room? Did she meet someone? Did she leave the hotel and come back later? The timeline becomes blurry, fading into the shadows of the Cecil's notorious history. She had walked into the hotel as a tourist on an adventure, but somewhere within its walls, her path took a dark and irreversible turn, leading her away from the lobby and into the heart of the mystery. For the Lam family back in Vancouver, January 31st began like any other day on Elisa's trip. They waited for the phone to ring. That daily call was their routine, their reassurance, their connection to their daughter, who was thousands of miles away on a solo journey. It was a simple promise she had made, and Elisa was known for her reliability and her deep love for her family. She had never missed a call before. But as the morning in Los Angeles turned into afternoon and then evening, the phone remained silent. The expected ring never came. A quiet unease began to creep into their minds, a small seed of worry planted by the uncharacteristic silence. As the hours ticked by, that quiet unease grew into a gnawing anxiety, and then escalated into full-blown panic. Her parents tried calling her, but their calls went straight to voicemail. They sent texts that went unanswered. Every moment of silence amplified their fear. This was not like Elisa. Even if she were busy or had lost track of time, she would have found a way to check in. For her to completely drop off the grid, especially on the day she was supposed to check out of the hotel and travel to her next destination, was a terrifying red flag. The silence wasn't just an absence of sound, it was a loud, screaming signal that something was terribly wrong. Unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Elisa's parents took the step every parent on Earth dreads. They contacted the authorities. They called the Los Angeles Police Department and reported their 21-year-old daughter missing. They explained her travel itinerary, her daily call routine, and the sudden, inexplicable break in communication. They provided her description and the name of the last place she was known to be, the Cecil Hotel on Main Street. With that phone call, a private family's terror became an official police matter. The search for Elisa Lam had begun, initiated by the very people she had tried so hard to reassure with her daily calls. The date is critical, January 31st. This was the day she was meant to leave the Cecil and continue her journey to Santa Cruz. Her bags were packed, her plans were made, her disappearance occurred at a pivotal transition point in her trip. She wasn't just missing from her room, she was missing from her own life's itinerary. The silence that fell on that day was absolute. It marked the end of her communications, the end of her documented journey, and the beginning of a mystery that would soon capture and horrify the world. The daughter who had promised to call home every day had fallen silent, and in that silence, a terrifying story began to take shape. With the missing persons report officially filed, the Los Angeles Police Department mobilized and descended upon the Cecil Hotel. Their investigation started at the most logical point, Elisa Lam's private room on the 4th floor. What they found inside only deepened the mystery. All of her personal belongings were there, seemingly untouched. Her luggage, her laptop, her wallet with her identification, and the books she had bought were all neatly accounted for. It was as if she had just stepped out for a moment, fully intending to return. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of a break-in, and no suicide note. The room was a static scene, offering no clues as to where she might have gone. The police expanded their search, methodically working their way through the hotel. The Cecil is a massive, sprawling building with a complex layout, hundreds of rooms, and a labyrinth of corridors, stairwells, and service areas. The officers, aided by search dogs, swept the premises from the basement to the roof. They checked public areas, staff-only zones, and even the ventilation shafts. They were looking for any trace of the missing student, a piece of clothing, a dropped item, or any evidence of foul play. But their extensive search yielded absolutely nothing. It was as if Elisa had dematerialized within the hotel walls. She had checked in, but she had not checked out, and she was nowhere to be found. Detectives began the painstaking process of interviewing anyone who might have seen her. They spoke with hotel managers, front desk clerks, cleaning staff, and security personnel. They tried to construct a timeline of her final day, but the information was sparse and inconclusive. Few remembered her specifically, and those who did could offer little beyond the fact that she was a guest who kept to herself. They also reached out to the public, printing and distributing missing person flyers. Elisa's smiling face was suddenly plastered on lampposts and in shop windows around the gritty neighborhood of Skid Row, a stark contrast to the despair that often defined the area. The media began to cover the story, but with no leads and no evidence, it was a slow-burning mystery. Despite the full mobilization of the police and the beginning of media coverage, weeks passed with no progress. The case grew colder with each passing day. For the Lam family, it was an agonizing wait, thousands of miles away, completely powerless and desperate for answers. For the LAPD, it was a frustrating dead end. How could a person simply vanish from a hotel in the middle of a bustling city, leaving all of their possessions behind without anyone seeing anything? The Cecil Hotel, with its long history of death and darkness, was holding on to its secret. The official investigation had hit a wall, and it seemed the case was destined to become another one of the hotel's many unsolved tragedies. As the on-the-ground search for Elisa stalled, investigators turned their attention to the hotel's digital eyes, its network of security cameras. They began the tedious task of reviewing hours upon hours of footage from cameras positioned in the lobby, in the hallways, and, crucially, in the elevators. They were looking for any sign of Elisa on or after January 31st. For nearly 2 weeks, this review process yielded nothing of significance. They could trace her movements in the days prior, confirming her presence in the hotel, but the trail went cold around the time she was last seen. The police were desperate for a lead, any piece of evidence that could breathe life back into the stagnant investigation. Then, they found it. Tucked away in the recordings from a camera in one of the hotel's elevators was a piece of footage so strange, so unsettling, that it would eventually become the single most defining element of the entire case. The video, date-stamped in the early morning hours of February 1st, showed Elisa Lam alone. It was the last known footage of her. Realizing its potential importance and hoping someone might recognize her or understand her behavior, the LAPD made a fateful decision. On February 13, 2013, they released the nearly 4-minute-long video to the public, uploading it to their website. They had no idea they were about to unleash a viral phenomenon. The footage was grainy, silent, and deeply disturbing. It shows Elisa entering the elevator and pressing multiple floor buttons. When the doors fail to close, she begins to act erratically. She cautiously peers out into the hallway, jumping back quickly as if hiding from someone just out of frame. She then steps out of the elevator, looks both ways, and steps back in, pressing herself against the wall in the corner. Her movements are agitated and bizarre. At one point, she stands just outside the elevator and begins gesturing with her hands, her fingers splayed and her arms moving as if she is talking to someone, or something, that the camera cannot see. After this strange pantomime, she walks away to the left, and she is never seen again. Only then, after she is gone, do the elevator doors finally slide shut, and the car appears to complete its journey to the other floors. The video was bizarre on multiple levels. Her behavior was baffling, and the elevator itself seemed to be malfunctioning, its doors remaining open for an unnaturally long time. The moment the footage hit the internet, it exploded. Millions of people watched it, shared it, and debated it. Amateur detectives, conspiracy theorists, and concerned citizens from around the globe became obsessed, trying to decipher the last ghostly images of Elisa Lam. The police had hoped for answers, but instead they had created 1,000 more questions. While the internet was frantically trying to decode the elevator video, a completely separate problem was brewing inside the Cecil Hotel. For weeks, guests had been lodging complaints about the hotel's water supply. The issues had started small. At first, just low water pressure in the showers and sinks. It was an annoyance, a mundane maintenance issue in an old, poorly maintained building. Hotel staff logged the complaints, but no immediate action was taken. The problem didn't go away. It got worse. Soon, the complaints evolved to something far more disgusting. Guests began to report strange, dark-colored water coming from their taps. Some described it as murky, others as having a blackish tint. The water would be discolored and leave a strange residue. Alongside the color came a foul odor and a bizarrely sweet, unpleasant taste. People were showering in it, brushing their teeth with it. Some may have even tried to drink it before realizing something was seriously wrong. The volume of complaints grew until hotel management could no longer ignore it. The situation reached a breaking point on February 19, 2013, 19 days after Elisa Lam was last seen. A guest, fed up with putrid black water filling his bathtub, went down to complain forcefully. This time, the complaint was escalated. Santiago Lopez, the maintenance worker, was dispatched to investigate. He knew the issues were originating from the hotel's main water supply, the 4 large cisterns on the rooftop. He took the service elevator to the top floor, bypassed a locked and alarmed door, and climbed stairs to the roof. Lopez approached the massive cylindrical water tanks, each about 10 feet tall. He started his inspection, noticing one tank's hatch was open, which was unusual. He grabbed a ladder, leaned it against the metal tank, and climbed up to peer inside. He expected to find a clogged pipe or a problem with the pump. Instead, in the dark, murky water, he saw something that would haunt him forever. Floating face up, just inches from the top, was the naked body of a young woman. The grotesque source had been found. The search for Elisa Lam was over. 2 weeks into the investigation, the search for Elisa Lam had grown frustratingly cold. The initial sweep of the Cecil Hotel had yielded nothing. Interviews were a dead end, and the missing person flyers seemed to be fading into the gritty urban landscape of downtown Los Angeles. The case was on the verge of becoming another permanent file in the LAPD's vast cabinet of unsolved mysteries. Desperate for a breakthrough, investigators decided to release a piece of evidence they had been analyzing, hoping it might jog someone's memory or provide a crucial new lead. On February 13, 2013, they uploaded a video to their official website, a move that would irrevocably change the nature of the case and turn a local disappearance into a global obsession. The evidence was a grainy, silent 4-minute video clip captured by a security camera inside one of the hotel's elevators. The footage was time-stamped in the early morning hours of February 1st, just hours after Elisa was last officially seen. The police released it with a simple plea to the public: "Can you help us understand what is happening here?" They hoped that someone watching might recognize the behavior, perhaps identify another person who was present but off camera, or provide some context for the bizarre scene that was about to unfold for millions of viewers across the internet. The LAPD likely anticipated a modest response from local news outlets and concerned citizens. They could not have predicted the firestorm they were about to ignite. The video was immediately captivating in the most unsettling way possible. It wasn't violent or graphic, yet it was saturated with a palpable sense of dread and inexplicable strangeness. It felt like watching a found-footage horror film, but the knowledge that this was real, that this was likely the last recorded moments of a missing young woman, made it profoundly disturbing. The poor quality of the footage, the lack of audio, and the eerie, almost theatrical nature of Elisa's actions created a vacuum of information that the human mind instinctively rushed to fill. It was a perfect storm of ambiguity and fear, a puzzle box that begged to be solved. Almost instantly, the video went viral. It was ripped from the LAPD website and re-uploaded to YouTube, Reddit, and countless forums and social media platforms. News organizations around the world embedded it in their articles, and amateur sleuths began dissecting it frame by frame. The Elisa Lam elevator video became a search term that skyrocketed in popularity. The police had hoped for a lead, but what they received was an unprecedented global crowdsourcing of an investigation. Millions of self-appointed detectives were now on the case, each with their own theory, their own interpretation, and their own conviction about what they were witnessing in those 4 minutes of chilling footage. The video begins with Elisa Lam stepping into the elevator car, her movements casual. She leans forward and presses a series of buttons, seemingly selecting multiple floors. She then retreats to the back corner and waits, but the doors do not close. After a few seconds, she cautiously approaches the entrance again. She leans her head out, looking first to her left, then to her right, as if checking the hallway for someone. Her movements are quick and furtive, like someone playing hide-and-seek or genuinely afraid of being seen. She quickly jumps back inside, pressing herself against the wall out of sight from the hallway. The doors still remain inexplicably open. Elisa then steps out, completely standing to the left of the entrance. She again peers down the hallway in both directions. Her behavior becomes even more bizarre. She begins to gesture with her hands, her arms moving in strange, almost fluid manner. Her fingers are splayed, appearing to talk or interact with someone or something just beyond the camera's view. Because there is no audio, viewers are left to guess at this silent, one-sided conversation. Is she pleading, explaining, arguing? It's an unsettling pantomime that raises more questions than answers. After nearly a minute of gestures, Elisa turns and walks away, disappearing from frame for the final time. Only after she has been gone for several seconds do the elevator doors finally slowly slide shut. The camera records the elevator moving upwards, stopping at floors, doors opening and closing on an empty car. The mechanical malfunction became a central point of debate. Why did the doors stay open for so long while she was there? Some viewers noted that holding the door open button can trigger a similar delay, suggesting she may have been keeping the doors from closing herself. Every detail was subjected to intense scrutiny. Internet sleuths analyzed the pixelated timestamp, some claiming it was tampered with, suggesting missing footage. Others tried reading her lips or interpreting her body language. The way she pressed buttons, the sequence she chose her retreat to the corner, every action was analyzed as a clue. Was she hiding from a pursuer standing just out of sight? Was she experiencing a powerful hallucination? Or was this a desperate attempt to fix a malfunctioning elevator? The video offered no clear narrative, only deeply unsettling and ambiguous moments. The release of the elevator footage transformed the Elisa Lam case from a local news story into an international phenomenon. The video transcended language barriers. The silent, grainy images of a young woman in distress were universally understood and deeply unsettling. Within days, it had been viewed millions of times on YouTube alone. The comment sections became sprawling, real-time forums where people from all corners of the globe shared their fears, their analyses, and their wild speculations. The video struck a nerve, tapping into primal fears of being followed, of losing one's mind, and of the unknown dangers that can lurk in seemingly ordinary places like a hotel elevator. Mainstream media outlets quickly picked up on the viral nature of the story, amplifying its reach even further. News channels in the United States, Canada, China, and across Europe aired segments analyzing the footage. They brought on psychologists, retired detectives, and security experts to offer their professional opinions. The story had all the elements of a gripping thriller: a young, relatable victim, a hotel with a sinister past, and a piece of inexplicable video evidence at its core. The global media attention put immense pressure on the LAPD, who were now dealing with an investigation that was being publicly debated and dissected by an audience of millions. The internet, particularly communities on Reddit and forums like sleuths, became the unofficial headquarters for the investigation. Dedicated threads were created where users collaborated, sharing information, timelines, and theories. They translated Elisa's blog posts, created maps of the hotel, and analyzed the video with a forensic level of detail that rivaled the police's own efforts. This digital manhunt was fueled by a genuine desire to find answers and bring justice for Elisa, but it also veered into the territory of obsession and, at times, irresponsible speculation. The line between helpful crowdsourcing and harmful rumor-mongering became increasingly blurred. This massive, decentralized investigation was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it kept Elisa's story in the public consciousness, ensuring that she would not be forgotten. The sheer number of people examining the evidence increased the possibility that a crucial detail might be spotted. On the other hand, it created a chaotic whirlwind of misinformation and conspiracy theories. The global reaction demonstrated the power of the internet to unite people in a common cause, but it also highlighted its capacity to create and spread narratives that were far removed from the facts. The world was watching, completely captivated by the ghost in the elevator. In the vacuum of concrete information, the internet did what it does best. It generated theories. They ranged from the plausible and logical to the paranormal and utterly bizarre. One of the most prevalent initial theories was that Elisa was under the influence of illicit drugs, such as hallucinogens like LSD or PCP. Her erratic movements, apparent paranoia, and interaction with an unseen entity seemed consistent with the effects of a powerful psychedelic substance. This theory suggested she was experiencing a bad trip that led her to act in a self-destructive manner. It was a simple, if tragic, explanation for her behavior, though it would later be challenged by the official toxicology report. A second major branch of speculation centered on the idea that she was not alone. Proponents of this theory argued that she was clearly hiding from someone. They pointed to the way she peered into the hallway and jumped back into the elevator as evidence of a pursuer standing just out of the camera's view. Her strange hand gestures were interpreted as a desperate, silent plea to her follower. This theory posited that she was either murdered by this unseen person, who then disposed of her body, or that she was fleeing from a real or perceived threat, and her fear led her to a tragic accident. Sleuths tried to enhance the video, looking for shadows or reflections that might reveal a second person. Then there were the paranormal theories, which the Cecil Hotel's grim history actively encouraged. Many viewers believed that Elisa was interacting with a supernatural entity. The hotel's reputation as a home for serial killers and a site of numerous suicides fueled the idea that it was haunted. In this narrative, Elisa was a victim of a malevolent spirit, her bizarre actions a result of demonic possession or ghostly torment. Some even connected her case to a Korean urban legend known as the elevator game, a ritual that supposedly allows one to travel to another dimension by pressing elevator buttons in a specific sequence, a ritual that bore a passing resemblance to Elisa's actions. Perhaps the most elaborate conspiracy theory involved a supposed government cover-up. Internet detectives discovered a strange coincidence. Shortly after Elisa's disappearance, there was a tuberculosis outbreak on Skid Row, near the Cecil Hotel. The name of the test used to screen for this disease was the Lam ELISA test, lipoarabinomannan enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. This incredible coincidence was seen by some as proof that Elisa was a biological weapon carrier or a government agent who knew too much and had to be silenced. They argued that her death was a targeted assassination, and the strange video was a clue to the conspiracy. This theory, while far-fetched, demonstrates the incredible lengths to which people would go to find a pattern in the chaos. Putting aside the more outlandish theories, many observers focused on the most tragic and probable explanation for Elisa's behavior, that she was in the midst of a severe mental health crisis. As someone with a documented history of bipolar disorder, Elisa was susceptible to extreme mood episodes. Her actions in the elevator, the paranoia, the erratic movements, the apparent disconnect from reality, are all consistent with a powerful psychotic or manic episode. In this state, a person can experience intense hallucinations, delusions, and disordered thinking. Her strange hand gestures might not have been a conversation with a ghost, but a frantic externalization of her own chaotic internal monologue. This interpretation reframes the video from a horror story to a profound tragedy. We are not watching a victim being stalked by a monster, but a young woman being tormented by her own mind. The elevator, with its malfunctioning doors, becomes a metaphor for her own feeling of being trapped and unable to escape her mental state. Her decision to press multiple buttons could have been a desperate attempt to get anywhere, to flee a reality that had become terrifying. The video, in this light, is not a paranormal event, but a raw, unfiltered, and heartbreaking look at the devastating power of mental illness when it goes unchecked and untreated. However, even this theory doesn't answer all the questions. If she was having a psychotic episode, how did she manage to gain access to the locked and alarmed hotel roof? How did she, in a likely disoriented state, climb a 10-foot water tank and lift its heavy lid? These practical, logistical hurdles are difficult to reconcile with the image of someone who is severely impaired. Some have suggested that the adrenaline and unusual strength that can accompany a manic episode might explain her physical capabilities, but this remains a point of intense debate. The mental health explanation provides a why, but it struggles to fully explain the how. Ultimately, the elevator video remains a Rorschach test for our own fears and beliefs. We see in it what we are prepared to see. Some see a ghost story, others a crime thriller, and still others a tragic documentary about mental illness. The footage is a 4-minute encapsulation of the entire mystery. It presents a series of inexplicable events, offers tantalizing but inconclusive clues, and leaves the viewer with a profound sense of unease. It is a haunting final performance from a woman who seemed to be crying out for help, either from a real threat, a supernatural one, or from the overwhelming chaos within her own mind. While the internet was consumed by the ethereal mystery of the elevator video, a much more tangible and grotesque situation was unfolding for the guests of the Cecil Hotel. For over 2 weeks, a growing number of complaints had been trickling in, all centered around the building's water supply. What started as a minor inconvenience, a noticeable drop in water pressure, had steadily escalated into a full-blown sanitary crisis. Guests on the upper floors began to notice that the water flowing from their taps and shower heads was no longer clear. It had taken on a disturbing murky quality with a dark, almost blackish hue that stained sinks and bathtubs, making basic hygiene an unsettling experience. The visual strangeness of the water was soon accompanied by an assault on the other senses. A foul, unidentifiable odor began to emanate from the drains, permeating bathrooms with a sickening smell. Worse still, the water itself had a profoundly unpleasant taste. Guests described it as strangely sweet, a cloying flavor that was both bizarre and repulsive. People had been showering in this contaminated water, brushing their teeth with it, and some, before realizing its corrupted state, had likely even drunk it. The volume and severity of the complaints reached a crescendo, forcing the hotel management to finally acknowledge that this was not a simple plumbing issue, but a serious problem that required immediate investigation. The tipping point came on the morning of February 19, 2013, a full 19 days after Elisa Lam had last been seen. A German couple staying at the hotel, disgusted by the black water and its foul taste, made a formal complaint that could no longer be brushed aside. The hotel's maintenance worker, a man named Santiago Lopez, was tasked with getting to the bottom of the problem. His experience told him that a widespread issue of this nature, affecting pressure, color, and taste, had to originate from the primary source, the large water cisterns located on the hotel's rooftop. These tanks supplied water to the guest rooms, the kitchen, and a coffee shop within the hotel. Unbeknownst to the complaining guests and the maintenance worker heading to the roof, they were all on the verge of discovering the horrific answer to two separate mysteries. The disgusting water that had plagued the hotel for weeks and the disappearance of the young Canadian tourist were not unrelated events. They were two sides of the same gruesome coin. The source of the sickness that flowed through the pipes of the Cecil Hotel was not a mechanical failure or a chemical contamination. It was something far more horrifying, a secret that had been decomposing silently in the darkness, just above the heads of the hotel's unsuspecting inhabitants. Armed with his tools and a sense of duty, maintenance worker Santiago Lopez began his journey to the hotel's rooftop. This was not an area accessible to the public or to guests. Reaching it required navigating a series of locked and restricted access points designed specifically to keep people out. Lopez took a service elevator to the 15th floor, the highest the elevator went. From there, he had to get through a locked door that led to a utility staircase. This door was fitted with an alarm that would trigger at the front desk if opened, a security measure to prevent unauthorized access. As an employee, Lopez had the key and knew how to bypass the system. After unlocking the door, he ascended the final flight of stairs that led to the roof's main access hatch. Pushing it open, he stepped out into the Los Angeles daylight, the city's sprawling skyline stretching out before him. The roof of the Cecil was a flat, utilitarian space, home to air conditioning units, ventilation systems, and most importantly, the 4 large water tanks that were the focus of his investigation. These imposing silver-painted metal cylinders stood in a row, each standing roughly 10 feet tall and 4 feet in diameter. They were aging structures, showing signs of wear and tear, but they were the heart of the hotel's plumbing system. Lopez began his inspection, walking along the platform that ran beside the 4 massive tanks. He was looking for any obvious signs of a malfunction, a leak, a broken pipe, or a problem with the pump mechanism. As he approached the tanks, he noticed something immediately out of the ordinary. The circular hatch on top of one of the cisterns was open. These heavy metal lids were meant to be closed at all times to prevent debris, animals, or contaminants from getting into the water supply. Seeing one ajar was a significant and unusual breach of protocol, and it immediately drew his complete attention as the likely source of the problem. To get a better look, Lopez grabbed a nearby ladder and leaned it against the side of the tank with the open hatch. He climbed carefully, his mind likely running through a list of possible contaminants. Perhaps a dead bird or rat had fallen in, explaining the foul taste and smell. He braced himself as he reached the top of the ladder, preparing to peer down into the dark interior of the massive water container. He was simply a man doing his job, trying to solve a plumbing problem. He had no way of knowing that he was about to make a discovery that would conclude a weeks-long search and send a shockwave of horror through the entire world. As Santiago Lopez peered over the rim and into the dark water of the cistern, his eyes struggled to adjust. The tank was nearly full, with the water level just a foot below the top. At first he couldn't make out anything other than the murky, dark liquid. But then, as his eyes focused, he saw something that made his blood run cold. There was an object submerged just beneath the surface. It was pale and indistinct, but it was large. His initial thought, a moment of disbelief, was that it was a mannequin or some kind of doll, but as he stared, the horrifying reality began to sink in. He could make out the shape of hands, arms, and dark hair floating in the water. It was a human body. Floating face up, completely naked, was the corpse of a woman. Her body was in an advanced state of decomposition after being submerged for nearly 3 weeks. The gruesome sight was the definitive answer to the hotel's water problems. The dark color, the foul smell, and the sweet taste were all the direct results of a human body decomposing in the water supply. Lopez recoiled in shock and horror, scrambling back down the ladder, his heart pounding in his chest. He immediately rushed to call his supervisor, his voice trembling as he tried to explain the unbelievable scene he had witnessed. The discovery immediately triggered a massive response. Lopez's supervisor called the police, and within minutes the Cecil Hotel was swarming with LAPD officers, detectives, and personnel from the fire department. They secured the rooftop, which was now officially a crime scene, and confirmed Lopez's grim finding. Inside the water tank was indeed the body of a young woman. Given the ongoing missing persons case, investigators strongly suspected they had found Elisa Lam. The search was over, but it had ended in the most nightmarish way. Inside a sealed water tank on the restricted access roof of the very hotel she had vanished from. The scene presented investigators with a cascade of baffling questions. How had she gotten up here? The rooftop was supposed to be locked and alarmed. How had she managed to climb into the 10-foot-tall tank? And most perplexing of all, how had she gotten the heavy lid closed from the inside, if that's what had happened? Floating in the water near her body were the clothes from the elevator video as well as her hotel room key. Her cell phone was also found at the bottom of the tank. The scene was tragic, bizarre, and seemed to defy any logical explanation, plunging the case into an even deeper mystery. The discovery of Elisa Lam's body presented the authorities with a significant and macabre logistical challenge. The opening at the top of the water tank was only about 20 inches in diameter, far too small to extricate a body, especially one that had been submerged and had likely become rigid due to decomposition. Furthermore, investigators needed to preserve as much evidence as possible from the tank, which meant simply draining it was not the first option. The fire department was called in to devise a plan for the delicate and grim task of removing the body from its watery tomb, a process that would have to be carried out in full view of news helicopters now circling overhead. After assessing the situation, the firefighters determined that the only viable way to recover the body without destroying the tank, or compromising the evidence within, was to cut a hole in the side of the massive metal structure. It was a complex and somber operation. They had to first drain thousands of gallons of the contaminated water from the tank, a process that took hours. As the water level lowered, the full horror of the scene was revealed to the officials on the roof. Once the tank was empty, firefighters used powerful cutting tools to carve a square opening into the side of the cistern, large enough for a person to pass through. Carefully, respectfully, the emergency responders reached into the tank and removed the body of Elisa Lam. The entire process was a grim spectacle, a stark and public end to a story that had begun with a young woman's hopeful journey. The body was placed in a bag and carefully lowered from the rooftop, away from the prying eyes of the media. The discovery sent a wave of revulsion through the hotel's remaining guests and staff, who now had to confront the horrifying reality that, for up to 19 days, they had been bathing in and drinking water that had been in contact with a dead body. The health department was called in, and the hotel was ordered to drain and sanitize its entire water system. With the body recovered, the investigation shifted from a missing persons case to a full-blown death investigation. The focus was now on the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, which would perform the autopsy to determine the official cause and manner of death. Detectives on the scene were left to grapple with the impossible physics of the situation. There were no ladders near the tank when Lopez found it. The lid was heavy, the rooftop access was alarmed, there was no evidence of foul play on the roof itself. The rooftop discovery had answered the question of where Elisa Lam was, but it had opened up a Pandora's box of new, seemingly unanswerable questions about how she got there. With Elisa Lam's body recovered from the water tank, the focus shifted from the rooftop to the sterile examination tables of the coroner's office. The world waited for answers, for a scientific explanation that could cut through the speculation and theories. Everyone wanted to know what had happened to her. Was it murder, suicide, a tragic accident? The autopsy was expected to provide the final word. On February 21st, just 2 days later, the coroner released the initial findings, but the report seemed to deepen the shadows rather than dispel them. The official cause of death was accidental drowning. This struck many as perplexing. How could a drowning in such a bizarre location be considered accidental? The report stated that a contributing condition was Elisa's bipolar disorder. This suggested her death was a tragic sequence of events precipitated by a severe episode. The report noted no signs of physical trauma, no bruises, no scratches, no cuts, no evidence of assault. This seemed to rule out the theory that she'd been attacked and forced into the tank. The toxicology screening was crucial. It tested for substances including illegal drugs like cocaine and heroin, as well as hallucinogens like LSD. The results came back negative for illicit substances. No traces of alcohol, aside from a negligible amount from decomposition. The only substances found were prescribed medications, antidepressants and mood stabilizers, but only at trace levels. This indicated she may have been under-medicating or stopped taking medication in the days before her death, triggering the severe episode that led to erratic behavior. The official narrative was set. Elisa, in a mental health crisis, climbed to the roof, entered the water tank, and accidentally drowned. Yet this conclusion felt hollow and incomplete. It failed to address the logistical impossibilities and strange circumstances. The report provided a cause but no explanation for how. The verdict felt like a label on unanswered questions, a simple answer for a complex mystery. The science had spoken, but for millions following the case, the story was far from over. While the autopsy provided a cause of death, it really did nothing to solve the most baffling logistical puzzle of the entire case. How did Elisa Lam get onto the roof of the Cecil Hotel in the first place? This was not a public space like, say, a rooftop bar. It was a restricted, staff-only area. To reach it, one had to take an elevator up to the 15th floor and then access a stairwell through a locked door. Now, this door wasn't just locked. It was also equipped with an alarm that, according to hotel staff, would have been triggered at the front desk and by security personnel if opened without a key. So, how could Elisa, just a guest, have bypassed this system completely undetected? The hotel staff insisted that only employees had the key to this door and that, as far as they knew, the alarm was in working order. This led to theories that maybe a hotel employee was involved, either by helping her get to the roof or by being directly responsible for her death. However, police investigations into the hotel staff turned up no viable suspects. Another possibility was that the alarm system was not as foolproof as the hotel claimed. In a building as old and honestly as poorly maintained as the Cecil, it's plausible that the alarm could have been malfunctioning or that there were other, less secure ways to reach the roof, like the fire escape running up the side of the building. Assuming she somehow made it to the roof, the next impossible question arises: how did she get into the water tank? These were not small containers. Each tank stood about 10 feet tall and there was no permanent ladder attached to them. She would have had to find a way to scale the smooth metal sides of the cistern. Even the maintenance worker had to use a portable ladder just to look inside. Furthermore, the lid of the tank was a heavy circular piece of metal that would have been difficult for a small-statured woman like Elisa to lift and move aside, especially if she was in a disoriented state. The sheer physical challenge of this act is, honestly, one of the biggest stumbling blocks for the accidental death theory. The final and perhaps most debated question is that of the lid. When Santiago Lopez found her, the tank's lid was closed, or at least ajar next to the opening. How could Elisa have climbed into the tank and then closed the heavy lid from the inside? It seems like a physical impossibility. Some have argued that the lid was already open and that it may have fallen shut after she entered, but this doesn't really align with the maintenance worker's testimony. The physical barriers to entry, the locked door, the lack of a ladder, the heavy lid, all combine to create a scenario that's incredibly difficult to explain as the actions of a single, unaided person, particularly one in a state of psychosis. The official verdict of accidental drowning due to a bipolar episode was meant to close the book on the case of Elisa Lam. It provided a neat, tidy explanation that absolved the hotel of negligence and ruled out the need for a criminal investigation. For the LAPD and the coroner's office, the case was officially resolved. However, for the public and for Elisa's family, this conclusion was deeply unsatisfying. It felt like a convenient summary that ignored the most troubling and inexplicable details. The verdict honestly created more debate than it resolved, leaving a trail of questions that continue to fuel speculation. One of the most persistent questions is why she was naked. The coroner's report offered no explanation for this. Her clothes, the same ones she was wearing in the elevator video, were found in the water with her. One theory, paradoxical undressing, suggests that people in hypothermia can feel overwhelmingly hot, causing them to remove their clothing. If the water was cold, this phenomenon could have occurred. Others argue that getting in with wet, heavy clothes would have been difficult, so she removed them herself, but without explanation, her nudity remains a bizarre detail. Furthermore, if this was an accident brought on by mental health crisis, where was the accountability? Elisa's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Cecil Hotel, arguing the hotel had a duty to protect its guests and prevent access to dangerous areas. They contended the hotel was negligent in security. However, the judge dismissed the lawsuit, ruling the hotel couldn't have foreseen a guest climbing into their water tanks. This legal decision left many feeling the system had failed Elisa. Years later, the official story still doesn't sit right with many people. The combination of the strange elevator video, the impossible logistics, her nudity, and the hotel's history creates a narrative full of holes. The accidental death theory requires accepting improbable events. For many, it's easier to believe in a cover-up, a murder, or paranormal encounter than accept the explanation. The verdict meant to be the final word became another chapter in an ongoing mystery, ensuring Elisa Lam's ghost would continue to haunt the Cecil Hotel and the internet for years to come. With the official investigation closed, but the public's curiosity burning brighter than ever, the Elisa Lam case transitioned from a police matter into a full-blown internet phenomenon. The elevator video had planted the seed, and the bizarre details of the rooftop discovery caused it to bloom into a sprawling international obsession. Online forums like Reddit, sleuths, and 4chan became the unofficial headquarters for a new kind of investigation. Thousands of self-appointed digital detectives from all over the world pooled their collective energy and time, dedicating themselves to solving a mystery that the authorities claimed was already solved. They were a global, decentralized detective agency, united by a shared conviction that there was more to the story. These internet sleuths approached the case with a level of granular detail that was both impressive and, honestly, at times obsessive. They meticulously deconstructed every piece of available evidence. Elisa's Tumblr blog was translated and analyzed, with every post scrutinized for hidden meanings or clues about her state of mind. The elevator video was slowed down, stabilized, and enhanced, with users debating the significance of a pixelated blur or a potential reflection in the mirrored control panel. They created detailed timelines of her trip, cross-referencing her blog posts with her known whereabouts. They even used Google Street View to retrace her steps in downtown Los Angeles, searching for anything out of the ordinary. The collective effort produced a staggering amount of data and speculation. Users shared hotel floor plans, historical articles about the Cecil's dark past, and lengthy essays proposing their own pet theories. This global crowdsourcing of the investigation kept the case alive, ensuring Elisa's story was not just filed away and forgotten. The constant discussion and sharing of information brought new eyes to the case every day, each person hoping to be the one who would find the missing piece of the puzzle that would finally make sense of the tragedy. The internet's relentless focus meant that every detail, no matter how small, was placed under a microscope. However, this frenzy of citizen investigation had a significant dark side. The anonymity of the internet allowed for the rapid spread of misinformation and baseless accusations. Rumors were presented as facts, and speculation quickly hardened into conspiracy. The line between helpful analysis and harmful obsession became dangerously thin. The digital detectives, in their passionate quest for answers, sometimes lost sight of the real human tragedy at the center of it all. Elisa Lam, the person, was at risk of being overshadowed by Elisa Lam, the internet mystery. The web had created a powerful but unruly investigative force, one that operated without rules, accountability, or restraint. Among the countless theories that emerged from the digital ether, one stood out for its sheer, unbelievable coincidence. It was a connection so strange that, for many, it simply had to mean something. Shortly after Elisa's death, internet sleuths discovered that a major outbreak of drug-resistant tuberculosis had occurred on Skid Row, the neighborhood immediately surrounding the Cecil Hotel. This was a significant public health crisis at the time, but the truly bizarre connection was the name of the medical test used to screen for this specific strain of TB. The test was called the lipoarabinomannan enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. or for short, the Lam-Elisa test. This discovery, honestly, sent the conspiracy forums into an absolute frenzy. The name of the test was a near-perfect match for the victim's name. To a rational mind, it was a one-in-a-million coincidence, a strange quirk of fate. But to a community already primed to see patterns and hidden meanings, it was undeniable proof of a massive cover-up. The theory quickly took shape. Elisa Lam was not a tourist. She was either a government agent or a whistleblower who had been sent to the area to gather information on this dangerous TB outbreak. Or perhaps, she was a carrier of a new biological weapon, and the Lam-Elisa test was the key to its creation or detection. According to this elaborate narrative, powerful forces, the government, a pharmaceutical company, a shadowy global syndicate, had discovered what Elisa knew or what she was carrying. They couldn't let her expose their secrets. Her murder, therefore, was a targeted assassination designed to silence her permanently. Her erratic behavior in the elevator was not a psychotic episode, but a desperate attempt to evade her professional killers. Her body was placed in the water tank not just to hide it, but potentially as a form of biological warfare itself, an attempt to spread the disease through the hotel's water supply. The entire case was a meticulously staged event to conceal a much larger, more sinister plot. While this theory sounds like the plot of a Hollywood blockbuster, it gained incredible traction online. It provided a grand, overarching explanation that neatly tied together all the strange elements of the case. It explained why she might have been targeted, and it gave a sinister purpose to the otherwise baffling placement of her body. Of course, there is absolutely no evidence to support any of this. It remains a product of pure speculation, born from a single compelling coincidence. Yet, the Lam-Elisa theory persists as one of the most popular and enduring explanations among conspiracy circles, a testament to the internet's ability to construct complex narratives from the thinnest of threads. Another theory that captivated internet sleuths drew a chilling parallel between Elisa Lam's case and one of Los Angeles' most infamous unsolved murders, the 1947 Black Dahlia case. The victim, Elizabeth Short, an aspiring actress, was found horrifically murdered and her body posed in a vacant lot. The case became a media sensation and has remained a source of morbid fascination for decades. Web detectives began to draw startling and eerie similarities between the two cases, suggesting that Elisa Lam's death was not a random event but a ritualistic copycat killing, a modern-day echo of a historical horror. The connections, when laid out, are undeniably spooky. Elizabeth Short was last seen alive at a hotel just a few blocks away from the Cecil. Some unsubstantiated reports even claim she had visited the Cecil's bar shortly before her disappearance. Both women were in their 20s, traveling alone in Los Angeles, and were found after high-profile, mysterious disappearances. Both cases involved a media frenzy and left a trail of bewildering questions. This theory suggests that whoever was responsible for Elisa's death was deliberately recreating elements of the Black Dahlia case, turning her murder into a dark artistic statement. The rabbit hole goes even deeper. The 2005 horror film, Dark Water, a remake of a Japanese film, features a story with uncanny resemblances to Elisa's fate. In the movie, a mother and daughter move into a rundown apartment building and are haunted by the ghost of a young girl who drowned in the building's rooftop water tank. The characters experience black, murky water coming from their taps, and the building's elevator malfunctions erratically. The film was released years before Elisa's death, but conspiracy theorists pointed to these similarities as evidence of a pre-planned, ritualistic murder that was mimicking fiction, or that Elisa herself was reenacting the film. This web of connections, linking Elisa Lam to the Black Dahlia and to the plot of Dark Water, created a powerful and seductive narrative. It suggested that her death was not accidental or the result of a simple crime, but part of a larger, more sinister pattern woven into the dark history of Los Angeles itself. Like the Lam-Elisa theory, there is no concrete evidence to support this. It is a tapestry woven from coincidences and eerie parallels, but it speaks to a deep-seated human need to find order in chaos, to believe that even the most horrific events are not random but are part of some larger, albeit terrifying design. Given the Cecil Hotel's long and blood-soaked history, it was inevitable that paranormal theories would become a central part of the internet frenzy. For many, the most logical suspect was not a person at all, but a malevolent entity that haunted the hotel's decaying halls. The Cecil was infamous as a site of numerous suicides, murders, and as a temporary home to serial killers like Richard Ramirez and Jack Unterweger. Believers in the paranormal argued that this concentration of tragedy had created a powerful negative energy, a vortex of despair that could latch onto vulnerable individuals. Elisa, with her known mental health struggles, would have been the perfect target for such a dark force. In this narrative, Elisa's erratic behavior in the elevator was not a hallucination but a genuine interaction with a non-human entity. She was not hiding from a person in the hallway, she was hiding from a ghost. Her strange hand gestures were not a sign of psychosis, but an attempt to ward off or communicate with a spirit that only she could see. The paranormal theory posits that this entity tormented her, drove her to a state of terror, and ultimately lured or chased her to the rooftop. There, it compelled her to climb into the water tank, leading to her death. This explanation neatly accounts for her bizarre actions and the lack of a human suspect. Internet sleuths also pointed to another popular piece of occult lore, the elevator game. This urban legend, which originated in Korea, describes a ritual for traveling to another world using an elevator. The ritual involves pressing a specific sequence of floor buttons, and if performed correctly, the doors will open not to another floor, but to a dark, alternate dimension, with a single red cross visible in the distance. Elisa's actions in the elevator, pressing multiple buttons and the subsequent malfunction, bore a striking resemblance to this ritual. The theory suggests she was attempting the game, either as a joke or out of genuine belief, and accidentally succeeded, with horrifying consequences. These supernatural theories, while impossible to prove, offered a kind of comfort to some. They placed Elisa's death in a realm beyond human comprehension and cruelty. It was easier to blame a demon or a ghost than to confront the possibility of a brutal murder or the profound tragedy of a mind succumbing to illness. The paranormal suspects, the ghosts of the Cecil, the demon from the elevator game, became characters in the story, allowing people to frame the tragedy as a real-life horror movie. In the end, these theories say less about what actually happened to Elisa Lam and more about our collective fascination with the unknown and the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the inexplicable. In the years since her death, the story of Elisa Lam has been dissected, debated, and mythologized to an extraordinary degree. It has become a cornerstone of modern internet lore, a go-to case for true crime podcasts, YouTube documentarians, and late-night Reddit discussions. Her name is now synonymous with mystery, with the eerie elevator video, and with the sinister reputation of the Cecil Hotel. The narrative has been twisted into a ghost story, a conspiracy thriller, and a cautionary tale. In this whirlwind of speculation and content creation, it is frighteningly easy to forget the most important and tragic fact of all. Elisa Lam was a real person, not a puzzle to be solved for entertainment. She was a daughter, a sister, and a student. She was a writer with a unique voice, a young woman who loved fashion, literature, and exploring the world. Her Tumblr blog, which became key evidence for internet sleuths, was, in reality, her personal sanctuary. It was a space where she expressed her joys, her insecurities, and her courageous battle with difficult mental illness. When we watch the elevator video, we are not watching a character in a film. We're watching a young woman in the throes of a profound and terrifying crisis, in what were likely some of the final, desperate hours of her life. The global obsession with her case has often stripped away her humanity, reducing her to a collection of bizarre clues and unsettling images. Reflecting on her story requires a conscious effort to look past the sensationalism and see the individual at its heart. We must remember the young woman who bought books and music to send home to her family, a final loving gesture that speaks volumes about who she was. We must remember the aspiring writer who bravely shared her vulnerability with the world in hopes of connecting with others. The endless theorizing, while born from human desire for answers, runs the risk of transforming her personal tragedy into public property, an abstract concept to be debated rather than a life to be mourned. The greatest respect we can pay to her memory is to remember the person, not just the mystery she left behind. The search for answers is a natural response to such a bewildering case, but it must be tempered with empathy. Elisa Lam's story is not about the Lam-Elisa test or the Black Dahlia. It is about a vibrant life cut tragically short. It is about the devastating impact of mental illness and the fragility of a person navigating the world while wrestling with inner demons. Before we dive back into theories and speculation, it is crucial to pause and acknowledge the profound loss that her family endured. The greatest mystery is not how she died, but how we can continue to tell her story in a way that honors the bright, complex, and hopeful person she was. Beyond the personal tragedy of Elisa Lam's death, her case serves as a stark and troubling indictment of the various systems that were supposed to protect her. Her story is a cascading tale of failures at multiple levels, from the healthcare system that managed her condition to the hotel security that should have ensured her safety. Each failure was a crack through which she slipped, leading her further down a path that ended in the most horrific of circumstances. The official verdict of an accidental death due to a bipolar episode places the responsibility squarely on her condition, but this overlooks the context in which that crisis unfolded. A context defined by systemic negligence and a profound lack of care. The first system that arguably failed her was the mental health care system. While Elisa was receiving treatment for her bipolar disorder, the toxicology report suggested she may have been under-medicating or had stopped taking her medication. For a young adult traveling alone, managing a complex medication regimen can be incredibly difficult. The lack of a robust support system for individuals with severe mental illness, especially when they are away from their familiar environment, is a critical issue. Her odd behavior, which prompted her roommates to complain, was a clear red flag, a cry for help that went unrecognized and unaddressed by anyone in a position to intervene in a meaningful way. The second, and more immediate failure, was that of the Cecil Hotel itself. The hotel had a clear duty of care to its guests, a responsibility to provide a safe and secure environment. Yet a guest was able to access a restricted, highly dangerous area of the property without anyone noticing. The fact that the rooftop door alarm was either malfunctioning or easily bypassed points to a serious lapse in security. Furthermore, the water tanks themselves, containing the hotel's potable water supply, were not adequately secured. The hotel's negligence, as argued in the family's wrongful death lawsuit, created the hazardous conditions that made her death possible. The dismissal of that lawsuit left a lingering sense that there was no accountability for these failures. Finally, the guest complaints about the water reveal a horrifying breakdown in the hotel's operational and sanitation standards. For nearly 3 weeks, guests were supplied with contaminated water, and their concerns were repeatedly dismissed as minor plumbing issues. This not only highlights a shocking disregard for guest health and safety, but also prolonged the discovery of Elisa's body, causing unimaginable distress to her family. Elisa Lam's death was not just an isolated accident, it was the tragic culmination of a series of systemic breakdowns. She was a vulnerable person who fell through the cracks of a world that was not equipped, or not willing, to catch her. The mystery of Elisa Lam is inextricably linked to the internet age in which it occurred. Her case unfolded in real time on a global stage, and her story has since become a permanent fixture of our digital landscape. She is, in many ways, an enduring digital ghost, her memory preserved not in official records or monuments but in the sprawling, chaotic archive of the internet. The elevator video is her most famous spectral image, destined to be replayed and reanalyzed indefinitely. Her Tumblr blog remains active in a sense, a digital tombstone that allows anyone to read her thoughts and see the world through her eyes, creating a strange and intimate connection with a person they never knew. This digital legacy is a powerful and complex phenomenon. On one hand, it has prevented her from being forgotten. In previous eras, a case like hers might have been a local headline for a few weeks before fading into obscurity, remembered only by her family and a handful of detectives. The internet has given her a form of immortality, ensuring that new generations will continue to discover her story, ask questions, and keep her memory alive. This constant attention speaks to the story's compelling nature and our collective, unending search for answers. The web has become the unofficial guardian of her mystery. However, this digital preservation comes at a cost. The internet is not a curated museum, it is a chaotic ecosystem where fact fiction and outright fantasy coexist without distinction. Elisa Lam's story has been warped and commodified, turned into clickbait content and conspiracy fodder. She has become a character in a story constantly being rewritten by strangers, her narrative often straying far from the known facts of her life and death. This process can be deeply disrespectful to her and her family, as her real-life tragedy is used as a springboard for entertainment and wild, unfounded speculation. Her digital ghost is not always a respectful memorial. Sometimes, it is a distorted echo. Ultimately, the case of Elisa Lam serves as a landmark example of how modern crime and mystery are consumed and processed by a connected world. It demonstrates the power of crowdsourced investigation, but also its inherent dangers. It highlights our ability to create enduring digital memorials, but also our tendency to reduce complex human beings to viral content. Elisa Lam's spirit will likely haunt the internet for as long as it exists, a permanent resident of our digital consciousness. The challenge for us as consumers of her story is to engage with her legacy responsibly, always remembering the real person behind the pixels and the very real pain her loss created. After all the investigations, the autopsies, the lawsuits, and the millions of words of online speculation, we are left standing in front of a wall of uncertainty. The case of Elisa Lam has been officially closed, but it has never been truly solved to the satisfaction of the public, and perhaps it never will be. The official narrative, that of an accidental drowning precipitated by a bipolar episode, provides a plausible framework, but it is a framework full of holes propped up by a series of highly improbable events. To accept it, one must believe that a young woman in a psychotic state managed to navigate a locked security system, climb a 10-foot tank without a ladder, lift a heavy lid, and get inside all without anyone noticing. This gap between the official explanation and the physical realities of the scene is where the mystery truly lives. It is this chasm of uncertainty that allows for every other theory to take root. Was a second party involved? Was it a hotel employee with a key, a stranger she met, or someone who followed her? The lack of any evidence of foul play makes the murder theory difficult to prove, but the logistical hurdles of the accident theory make it equally hard to accept. We are left with two competing narratives, neither of which feels complete, forcing us to choose the least impossible option. Perhaps the most honest conclusion is that we will never know the full truth of what happened to Elisa Lam in her final hours. The only person who knew for certain what transpired in that elevator and on that rooftop is no longer here to tell her story. The security cameras did not capture everything, and the physical evidence was left ambiguous. The Cecil Hotel, a silent, brooding character throughout this saga, holds its secrets tight. The truth may be lost forever, submerged in the same dark water where Elisa's body was found, a permanent and irretrievable part of the hotel's grim legacy. And so, the story of Elisa Lam endures not because we know what happened, but precisely because we don't. It is a perfect, modern mystery, a chilling reminder that even in our hyper-documented world of constant surveillance, a person can simply vanish, and the final moments of their life can remain an impenetrable enigma. Whatever you believe, accident, murder, or something else entirely, the case forces us to confront the terrifying reality that some questions may never have answers. The water at the Cecil Hotel eventually ran clear, but the story of Elisa Lam will forever remain murky, dark, and profoundly unresolved.